So we're at the end of Peites Amid Beis 89b. We're going to do Daf Tzadik today. So the Mishnah had said if somebody carries different types of spices, they will combine in order to have the requisite amount to count as carrying on Shabbos. And what is the requisite amount for Shabbos? Enough to spice scrambled eggs. So the Gemara is going to contradict this from a halacha in regards to the halacha in regards to the requisite amount that's chayiv in forbidden produce of arlo or other growth. So the halacha is Tavlin Shnayim v'Gimel Shemos Mimin Echad. If you have two or three names from one type, or Mishlosha Minim v'Shem Echad, or it's three types and one name. Asurin, they would be prohibited. Umitztarfin Zemzeh, and combine with each other. So what does it mean? Three spices of one name. Rashi learns one name here means the name of the name of the spice. And Rashi says, for instance, black pepper, hot pepper, a white pepper, various peppers. So they're all they're called pepper, but they're different spices. And so whether it has two or three names or one name, or three different spices entirely, then it's going to combine and be prohibited. Now, Tues says no, that the meaning of Shem Echad is we have throughout Shas the term name is for the basis for its prohibition. So something that's prohibited, say for instance, because of Shabbos, and it's also prohibited because of kosher. Those would be two shemos, two names, meaning two bases for the prohibition, and that's why Tues learns this. There's also a distinction in the punctuation according to Rashi and Tues. Rashi seems to punctuate like this: if you have multiple spices, regardless of what it's called, that are prohibited, comma, they will combine with each other. Tues, in the second Tues on the page, says it differently. He reads it as if you have multiple spices from different prohibitions, they are prohibited and combined. And then Tues asks, what's the combination? If they are prohibited, that's what combining means, and has an explanation for that. In any case, we're going to go with Rashi. So if you have black pepper, white pepper, and other pepper, whether it's the same name or not, they will. They are since they are prohibited, they will combine to the prohibition. And the Chizkiya says this, that it says that that it combines. It's only if it actually combines in a food. B'mine masika, it's all going to make the pot better. Shanu. They will combine since they can combine in a food. So that's they only combine if they will combine and make the food taste good. But if it's a mismatched spice, then it wouldn't go together, and they would not combine. So Gemara says, so too over here we're going to say that the spices we're carrying are talking about spices that would actually combine in making a food taste better. Sorry.
Thank you for not blowing on the phone, because,
You're always appreciate your appreciation. All right, we're in Tzadi Amid Aleph, third line in Klipe Agazin, Klipe Arbanim Stisapua, which are, we said, basically they're shells and leaves, and they make different color dyes. You need to have enough that you can actually dye a small garment. Today, let's buy a bag of cotton. For a minute, so we have a contradiction. I might see some manim sharuyim. Today, let's buy a dugma leira. That if somebody has dye already made, not just the ingredients, which our Mishnah here is talking about, the shells of walnuts, etc. But if somebody has already made dye, it's all you need is enough to make a small piece of material that you can use as an example, a sample of the dye. Amar Rav Nachman Rav Abu, and we saw this earlier in the Gemara. Because no one's making going through the process of making dye for a tiny piece of material that you're going to use as a sample. People only make dye in larger quantities because it's a big process, and the minimum that somebody would make it for is for a small garment, not for an example, a small sample piece. Once it's made, of course, then even a small amount of dye is going to count because people do make samples, and therefore that's going to count. But when you only have the raw material, it's insignificant if it's less than enough to make dye a small garment, because no one's actually going to do less than that. In the last part of the Mishnah, we saw the basically detergent that was used to remove either a blood stain, which is small, or just a general garment, small garment. And one of the ingredients is meraglayim, urine. Tana meraglayim ad ben memyom. The urine used in detergent is up to 40 days. Yeah. It was not lemon-scented detergent. Neser, Tana Neser, Luchsanus v'le Neser on Tantrin. Alexandrian nitra, but not from Anpantrin. Rashi says it's a place. I don't know where or what. Maybe one of the translators tell you what it is. I don't know. Boris, type of soap. That's what the modern Hebrew it's used, but it was a detergent. So Rabbi Yehuda zechol. So Rabbi Yehuda says it's a sand. But we have a brayso that says soap and sand. And by the way, this is not the same sand used earlier, which we said was a thick sand used for plaster. This is a sand used for detergent. But boris is distinct to that because we see in the brayso it's separate. Elamai boris kavrisa. So what is boris? It's sulfur. Mesave, we have a contradiction to that. In regards to the Shemitah, produce that grows from the ground that you're not allowed to benefit from if you harvest it or plant it. So Hosef Alein, they added to it hachalbitzin, v'ha'al'inun, v'ha'boris, v'ha'ol. And these are roots and leaves. Again, these are bitter, but they have a functional use. And if you say that boris is sulfur can't be prohibited on the Shemitah year because it doesn't grow. It's not something you plant. It's not something that grows. Is kavrisa even prohibited in the Shemitah year? By the time we learn Zaklal, as we know, as a rule on the Shemitah year, this is the rule. Anything that has a root. So then there's Shemitah. And if it doesn't have roots, it doesn't apply to Shemitah. So, of course, sulfur would not be included. Elamai boris. So what is boris? Ahala. It's, some say aloe, some plant, which the leaf was used for cleaning. And Gemara says, wait, but the brayso names them distinctly. Vatanya ha-boris va-ala. We have boris and ala, two separate things. Tzrei gavni ala, there are two types of ala. And one ala is called boris, and one is the generic ala. So we are on 90A, just a few lines before the Mishnah. Kimulia. What is kimulia? That's what are the ingredients in the detergent. Rabbi Yehuda shlofdutz. Rabbi Yehuda says it's shlofdutz, and Rashi says, got no idea what that is. And the Mefarshim and the Shulchan Aruch say that's why we don't really use this. I have no way of using it because actually some of the ingredients are just unbeknownst to us. And this is a general thing with many of the potions in the Gemara. We don't know what they are on account of that we don't have certain ingredients. Ashlag. What is Ashlag? I asked all of the sailors. And they said, Shana Shmei. It's called Shanana. And you find it in the holes of the shells where you find pearls. And you need a metal screw to be able to get it out. No idea what it is, but it's sub part of the shell. So we get to the Mishnah. Mishnah says that a list of items that are used for some sort of have some sort of medicinal use, and those the measure of how much is used is going to be enough to transgress carrying on Shabbos because it's a significant item, even though that it's very small. But since it's used for it has a functional use, it would count as carrying. Palpeles kol shehu, a peppercorn, even a small amount, so the smallest size, and this was used for fresh breath, and so any amount is going to count as carrying a significant amount, like somebody carrying a single Listerine strip. Right? The Listerine strips are really insignificant alone, but since it can be used, a single one, it's going to count. The itran kolshu, and itran we saw earlier in the Masechta. It's a type of itran is a neft. It's a type of oil or fuel. So kolshu, any amount, and we'll see later in the Gemara, it's used to sniff on for headaches. Mine besamim, mine matches kolshe, spices, any types of spices, any type of metal, any amount is enough. We'll see in the Gemara why. Me'avnim mizbeach, ma'afar mizbeach, stones of the mizbeach, dust of the stones of the mizbeach, makak sfar, makak maseir, and the crumblings off of books, svarim, sifrei kodesh, and their cloth that protects them, since they all need to be go into Geniza, they need to be treated respectfully. So you're always taking care of them and carry that, and that's significant because, as we saw, anything that you care about, that you would hold on to, is going to be sufficient to say that that's the requisite amount to carry. Because people put them away in order to do geniza on them, to set them aside because they're holy. Rabbi Yehuda says not only holy things but also idolatry that needs to be put aside, since that also you have something that you need to do with it, and so you maintain it, as it were, you hold on to it, save it, as it were, in order to do the mitzvah of destroying it, of putting it aside, of burying it. And therefore, that too is significant in that you have a mitzvah to do with it. You have an obligation to do with it. That's significant enough to hide. And if you hide it, meaning you keep it, that's enough to carry as well. So, popelas kol shula ma'achazia, a little bit of peppercorn. What is that for? For creating a good scent in the mouth. Itran kolshu, and itran. Lamai chazi, what is that good for? Letzil chasa, for a bad headache, a headache of half the head. Some say that's what Rashi calls it, and some say that's a migraine. If we know exactly what type of fuel, what type of tar or neft itron is, maybe we could try that and market it. Sniff some itron for your headache. Mine b'samim kolshu, any spices, any amount. Tanabanan. So the Brisa said, "Amitzir reach ra kolshu, shemen tov kolshu, argama kolshu, u'sul savered achas." So anybody who takes out this bad odor, this scenting thing, which was basically smoke that they would bring in for children that were ill, in order to ward away the bad spirits, or a little bit of oil, which was used as good oil, or argama, which is the color, and whether that's, Rashi says, not sure whether that too is for the scent or not, and sulas avered, which is either rose petals, and one of them would be enough, or it's cloth dyed rose color with rose leaves, and that's what it is. Either way, one of them is sufficient and would be chayiv. All of these things are usable in a minuscule amount, and therefore any amount would be significant and counted as significant in carrying it. Mini matras, small, any amount of metal. So what are you going to do with a tiny piece of metal? Mini matras kolshet lamai chazi. What are you going to do with it? Tiny Rishimen Allah Zayimish can roin lasas memeno darban cotton. It has to be small, large enough that you can make a small little receptacle in order to put the spices that we just mentioned in, some sort of little, I want to say tube that's big already, but a small receptacle. Somebody says, I accept upon myself to donate to the Beis HaMikdash metal. You cannot donate less than 1 amma by 1 amma. Well, what use does the Beis HaMikdash have for a piece of metal size of an amma? It's to keep away the ravens. And they would put that on the top of the wall as sort of like a sharp blade on the top, and they don't rest on it because it's not a comfortable resting place, and then the ravens don't come and sit on the Beis HaMikdash walls. If some the other way, some say the other way around, that you have to give enough for a kal yakarna. It was something that a kal yorev, something that would keep away the ravens. The comment, how much was that? And the distinction is there a minimum amount or a minimum function? And then if the function changes, then it would have to be larger or smaller. The choshes, if somebody donates and says it's a common upon me to bring copper to the Beis HaMikdash, the copper should equal a ma of silver. Tanya Rabbi Eliezer Eimer liifchas mitzinora katana shel choshes. Rabbi Eliezer, however, says that you should not. It should have enough to make a small tweezers of copper. What's that for? Because in the menorah, in fixing the wicks, you would lift up the wicks and make holes, and so that there's oxygen, so that it goes through and it burns nicely, and also whatever ash or parts of the wick fall off into the cup, the menorah itself. So that needs to be taken out and to clean out. And every day before relighting, there was cleaning, and so you have these copper tweezers used for cleaning. The dust Sfarim, of the holy books, Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, or whatever it would be, and that fall apart, and also the cloth wrapping around it. Rabbi Yehuda mekak the sifri, tachach the shiroi, ve'ila the invi, oped the te'eni, v'ha the rimoni, kula sekanto. The worms that eat books, so bookworms, and the worm that eats the cloth around it, and the worm that eats grapes, and the worm that eats figs and pomegranates. They're all dangerous, and they have a different name for the worm based on what it is, whether the fruit and so on. So it's called makak and tachach and ila and pa and ha, and they're all dangerous. So Ahu Talmuda, the Gemara tells a story that Rabbi Yasa Kamed Rabbi Yechon was sitting in front of Rabbi Yechon ka'achal te'eni, and he was eating figs and didn't check it to see whether it had one of these worms in it. Amalei Rabbi Kutzi Yeshua, he says there are thorns in this fig. Amalei, so Amar, he said, katle pa ledein. This worm is killing this kid. I don't know if it's literally killing or hurting him or it's endangering him. Next Mishnah, bottom of Tzadiyam and Aleph. I might see kupas aruchlin. Somebody carries a peddler's box. Now, a peddler's box would have many different squares, boxes within it, that each one kept a different spice, and the peddler would carry it around and sell whatever spice people needed. So kupas harochel, in this whole box, even though there are various types of spices in there, so perhaps you think each one is a separate prohibition or a separate transgression. And he only has to bring one chatas if he carried it on Shabbos, because each one, even though they're in there, it's really one item that he's carrying.
Even though that it's merchandise, it doesn't matter that. I mean, before we were talking about spices, whether it's tarif, we're talking about a person who's going to use, pepper in his salad or whatever. But here you're talking about a small quantity, but it's a sample. It's his chora.
And
so why wouldn't any amount be usher? I mean, how is he allowed to carry around?
Oh no, this is not the requisite amount. To clarify, this is not a minimum amount. This is saying a different thing. That regardless of what, so I'll backtrack a little bit. If you remember, we talked about in the other halachas. If somebody's carrying any instrument, they're carrying the spice in, or the food on, the plate that he's carrying the food on, or containers, whatever it may be, the utensil being used, you're not chayav on, because that's not what you're trying to carry. You're carrying the contents, and therefore there's a minimum amount for the content, and the vessel that's holding the content you're exempt for, because that's not your purpose. With this, it's the other way around. Even though that there are many different spices and in order to make different perfumes in these boxes, and each one is separate. However, for the peddler, what he's carrying is the single entity. And so this is not a minimum amount question. Of course, like Michael was pointing out, each one of these spices could have a minimum amount, but they're not going to be a separate chatas for each one. The box unites it, because to the peddler, he's got one item that he's carrying, a peddler's box. And in there are many different things. But he's carrying one peddler's box, and therefore the chatas is a single chatas, a single transgression. So we've shifted over here from the minimum amount needed, and as Michael pointed out, each one of them should be the minimum amount. If he's carrying it out, obviously he wants it, and this is to give samples or to make spices for the people he's selling to. However, the 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 person himself, the peddler himself, he doesn't. For him, the idea is that he's got one single box, and we're not talking about the minimum amount, but how many chatasas does he have? Does he need for each one of the spices, each one of the perfumes, a separate prohibition, a separate transgression, and therefore a separate chatas offering, or no? What he's saying over here is that this is a single chatas for all, because to him it's a single entity. My spice box, my peddler's box. Now, have appreciated me in harbe in a chayev el chatasachas. Zar onegina pachas mikrogeres. Even though that we said for food the minimum amount is grogeres, but for planting seeds, since he's intending to seed them, so it's even less than a grogeres. So Rabbi Tzvi Fischer zera kishuin shnayim. So Rabbi Tzvi says it's 5 for kishuin shnayim, zera deluin shnayim. So kishuin and deluin, which are types of gourd, let's say zucchini and pumpkin, 2 seed. Pula mitzri shnayim for fava beans. I think Michael Rosenberg used to say would say. Is this fava beans?
Yep.
There you go. Right. Chagav chai, a live grasshopper. Tahor, if it's kosher, kol shehu, any amount. Mace, if it's dead, kirgegeres. So then it's food and it needs a gregeres size. Tzeporas karamim, also a type of grasshopper. Bein chaya, bein mesa, regardless of whether it's alive or not, kol shehu, any amount. Why? Shematzninos or food, because it's used for a medicinal purpose. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, alfa moitzi chagav chai. No, even the other type of grasshopper, tame, even if it's not a kosher type of grasshopper that you're not allowed to eat, kol shehu, any amount. Shematzninos lekadol ischakol, because it's kept for children to play with. This is their pet grasshopper, and so therefore he says that even if it's less than an amount, any amount would be sufficient to play with. Ramino, so we ask a contradiction. You say that it's a seed is a small amount, less than a gergeres, but we have in regards to fertilizer, there's a minimum amount. You have to be enough zevel v'choil adak, this thin sand and fertilizer. Kadei l'zabel kalach shel kruv. Rabbi Akiva says it has to be enough that you can fertilize a patch of kruv. Michael, what I like to call kruv.
For some reason, you don't call it cabbage, which is what it is. You call it Brussels sprouts.
Yeah, modern Hebrew, it's cabbage, but it's actually Brussels sprouts in the Gemara. Divrei Rabbi Akiva, that's Rabbi Akiva. Rav Papa, the Chachamim say kedel zabel krisha. It's enough to fertilize a patch of krisha, which is either leek or cress. Amar Papa, hada zriya, hada lezriya. Depends if it's already planted or if it's not yet planted. Lafi she'ein adam terech lahitzini ma'achas lezriya. A person is not going to bring out one plant in order to plant it. That's not enough. And so if it's already planted, each one itself is worth it, and therefore a person will fertilize each plant. But a person's not going to come out and plant a single seed. Zera kishuin. So the seed of the plant, the seed for kishuin, which is a type of gourd. So somebody takes out seeds. So in natia, if he's planting them, shtayim, you need 2. Im lachila, but if it's to eat, So then there's an amount that would be something that you would feed. So how much would you feed? Enough that it would fill the mouth of a pig. How much is that? Achas, a single one. Im lahasik, if you bring it out in order to use for fuel for a fire, kedei lavashal beitza kala, enough to cook an egg, scrambled eggs, as we saw earlier. Im lacheshbon shtayim, and if you're using them as to remember a number, and each one it's basically a counting tool. So then it have to be minimally 2. Acherim say, which is Rabbi Meir usually, that you need 5, because other than that, that's not it doesn't help your counting. Tanar Rabban in the Brisa taught, Hamotzi shnei nimim mizanav asus and mizanav apar. Somebody who carries 2 hairs of a horse tail or a cow tail, chayiv is chayiv. Why? Because people save them in order to make a thread for a bird's trap. I don't know how that bird's trap was set in order to make for that kind of trap, but it was used in two such hairs is sufficient to make a certain thread used for a bird trap. Miksha shachazir, the stiff hairs off of the back of a pig. Achas, that's sufficient with 1, and I'm not sure, what this is. It's some sort of sewing. They would use it at the end of a weave. Not sure what function it did, but at the end of a weave, it was firm and kept.
He said here something about shoemakers use it.
Shoemaker?
Shoemakers, he says, Lefisha sandlorim noisnim oisa berosh chut hatzvira mishtamshim bo kemachat.
It's firm enough to use like a needle, like a sewing needle. Okay. Tzuri dekel shtayim. Tzuri dekel are peelings off of a palm tree in order to weave. So you get a palm branch in order to weave. And so you'd need 2 of those if it's the thicker type, and tzuri dekel. And if it's a thinner type, so then one of them is sufficient because you can self-weave into itself. Tziporas kramim. And what's Tziporas kramim? Which is a type of grasshopper. So bein chai bein mesa kol, whether it's alive or dead, any amount. So my Tziporas kramim, Amar Rav Pale Biari. Rav says it's this known grasshopper, the Pale Biari. Amar Abaye Mishtakach bedikla dechad nivara, and it's found on young palm trees. Va'avdila lechukma, and they use it as a potion of sorts for wisdom, for retention of information. So how do you do it? They cut it in half, and they would eat the right side of it. And the left side they would separate and put into a copper tube sealed with 60 seals. And as we saw, this 60 seals multiple times, it doesn't mean 60 seals. It means multiple seals of different types, a wax seal and a lead seal, etc. But the smaller, and they would hang it on the left arm. And the way to remember it is leiv chacham liyamin, the heart of wisdom is to the right. Leiv ksila smola, and the fool's heart is to the left. That's the pasuk in Mishlei. The idea is that chachma is on the right, and wisdom. V'chakim kamadaboy, and then he learns whatever he needs to know. V'gamar, and completes it or reviews it. Kamadaboy, as much as he needs. V'achale le'idach palga, but then he must eat the other half of this grasshopper the Eloi Miyakatamud, if not, is going to forget it. So you start off with eating the right side, studying, cram for the test, everything you need, and then you study, and then you eat the left side, and you remember it. Rabbi Yehuda Eimer Alfa Moitzi. By the way, for all the parents there in this class, do not try this at home, and don't let your kids try this at home. Rabbi Yehuda Eimer Alfa Moitzi. Rabbi Yehuda says also if somebody carries a living grasshopper, it's also going to be prohibited. So Rabbi Yehuda Eimer Alfa Moitzi v'Tanakama. Why doesn't the Tanakama say this? Because that children will play with it, and therefore it has value, and so it's significant enough if you carry it. In Saba, like he says, no, it doesn't count as a children's toy. My time, because parents don't let their children play with dead non-kosher, live non-kosher grasshoppers, crickets, or whatever. Because he's maybe the child's going to eat it. Well, then even a living grasshopper, you shouldn't let him play with. They shouldn't let them play with because that too is not allowed to eat. The Rav Kahana was in front of Rav. And a grasshopper called Shushiva walked across his lips. And Tues points out that Shushiva is actually a non-kosher grasshopper, so it was a different type. Amale Shakle, take it away. Don't just eat it. Dilalirmi is right. Take it away because the lolemru mechel kachale, that people shouldn't say, look at him, he's eating a live grasshopper. If he's going to, if you're going to let it just land on your lips like that, people are going to say you're eating it. And what's the problem? The problem is you can't eat a live grasshopper because it's about to shaksu. It's disgusting. And the Torah doesn't let. Ella dilma mayis v'achale. The point is, of course, a living one, we're not concerned they're going to eat. But what about a dead one? A dead one, we're afraid it's going to, he's going to eat. And the child playing with this cricket, with this grasshopper that's not kosher, if he plays with it, it may end up that the grasshopper dies, and then he'll eat it. Rabbi Yehuda, and what does Rabbi Yehuda say? Why is he not concerned with that? Imayis katem mispetzav. If the grasshopper dies, since it was his toy, his pet, the child is going to cry about it. He's not going to eat it. This was his pet. You can't eat your pet. And in fact, they'll be sad about it. Hadran Allah Amar Rabbi Akiva. With this, we complete Perek Amar Rabbi Akiva, which had a lot of different halachas that Rabbi Akiva testified and a drash for those halachas, and the continuation of the prohibition of carrying. What's the minimum amount? With this, we complete Amar Rabbi Akiva. We should come back to Bez Hashem. Hamatzniya. So we saw earlier that anything that people keep, hold on to. Hamatzniya means you hide or you put away, meaning that you save because it is a value. That's significant enough that if you carry it, you'd be transgressing on account of that. That's clearly a value to you. And therefore, even if it's not the requisite amount for others, if you are the one that, if you save it for yourself, it's going to be sufficient. So, hamatzniya lazera, somebody who saves in order to plant, uladugma, enough to show his wares off, so it's an example, ularafua, or for medicinal reasons, v'hotziyah, and after he saved this, he carried it. So chayiv, b'kolshu, so he's going to be chayiv in any amount. V'chol adam, ein chayiv alav ela kashira, but other people are only going to be chayiv if it's the measure itself. And we saw earlier that Shimon Elazar says that no, since it's yours and you consider it significant, even other people would transgress. And we saw the idea of a student by an apprentice by their master. Also, if the master considers it of value, it would be considered of value. But the Chachamim say no, it has to be of value to you or a universal minimal value that most people use. But if it's of no significance to you, or it's generally no significance to people, then you're not going to transgress. But the person who does consider it significant enough that they put it aside in order to save it, so the hoarder or the one that has a specific need for it, for them, it's going to be significant enough to transgress if you carry it. But all other people, it's only if it's the minimum amount. Also, if you carried it out, so let's say for you, for the minimum amount of seeds is 5 seeds in order to plant. But you saved even 1 seed. You're going to make a small garden, and even 1 seed is sufficient. And you carry it out so that you're going to transgress. But if you're bringing it back in, so that shows that you no longer intended to plant it, and that will show that you don't consider it significant enough, and therefore you're going to have the minimum in order to transgress the bringing it back in. Why does it say someone who hides it? It should say somebody who carries it. If he's carrying it for planting, as an example, as a sample piece, or for medicinal reasons, chayiv, because he's carrying it with a purpose. Chayiv culture is he's going to transgress even in a small amount. Abaye says, what talking about is, of course, if you actually take it out to plant, then you're going to transgress because you plant it, even though you never put it aside for that. Over here, we're talking about what he had put it aside for something, but he doesn't remember for what. And at the time that he's carrying it, he doesn't remember the reason that he actually put it aside. But he knows he put it aside, and at the time that he had intentionally put it aside, that he obviously created a value in this item. And now, when he's carrying it, he doesn't know what that value is. Nevertheless, he's going to transgress, Abaye says, on account of that at some point it was a value. And we don't say, look, you don't even remember what it's for, and therefore the intent that you had when you put it aside is null and void, and therefore it goes back to the minimum amount, and you don't have a minimum. So Abaye says, no, that's what the Mishnah is telling us. It's since at some point you knew why you put it aside, and at that point you made this of value to you, even though now you don't remember, you're going to be chayiv.
You're going to be chayiv in any amount, is that right? Or is
the amount that you put aside. So let's say we're talking about paint, dye for which we said it has to be enough to dye a small sample cloth, and this is less than that, but you set it aside. So clearly to you, this is a value, even though you don't remember what value it had. But now you're carrying something that you had set aside clearly at the point that it had a value, and therefore you're going to be chayiv. V'shachar forgot why he set it aside. And now he's just carrying it without an intent because he doesn't even remember why. So Abaye says, no, since it was originally set aside, so the carrying now is of significance because you're doing it within the framework of the original intent. Tomorrow we'll see Rav Yehuda and the continuation of this discussion of minimum amounts of carrying.